It's 4 p.m., so we are starting. Welcome. Thank you for joining me here today. This panel is hosted by Panopticon Foundation. We invite you all to reflect on the current condition of digital services. Yes, welcome. Just on time. I see what happened. Everybody was having coffee. Okay, one more minute for them to... Oh my God. But okay, I feel relieved because we always have full room and today was half empty and I felt like, what did I wrong with the title? Although I have to say the program is so rich this year. I would also go to a different panel if it was up to me. Okay, welcome everybody. This is a panel hosted by Panopticon Foundation. We invited you to reflect on the current condition of digital services, so not only social media, but social media included, in Europe, which is not looking good, and the future of user experience made in Europe, which is hopefully looking brighter, but no spoilers yet. First, a short introduction. I'm Katarzyna Szymielewicz from Panopticon, and it's my maybe 10th time here, so I hope many of you know who we are, what we do. If not, there will be time to talk to us later. And I'm joined by wonderful panelists, a great variety of expertise and backgrounds. We have Isabelle Perignon, Director for Consumer Policy at the European Commission with us. We have Felix Latke, CEO of Mastodon. We have Lynn Hugesen from Norwegian Consumer Council, and we have Vid Logger, software engineer and independent expert working freelance with Panopticon Foundation on these issues. You will be able to read their very rich bios when they speak, so don't worry about that. And now I feel there is something in the title of that panel that I should explain. You can say, okay, consumer services can be fair and can be personalized, but what do you really mean by sovereign? Since we are not discussing member states' policies here, and we are not discussing the power play over infrastructure in the traditional sense of that word. So I want to tell you that there is governance in a strict sense in our online experience. Those spaces are governed. They are governed by private entities, which is not good news for us, but definitely what happens there fulfills the definition of us being governed, so us not being fully sovereign. Probably a better term would be self-determination of consumers, citizens when they go online. That's what we are aiming for, but CPTP has named that track digital sovereignty, so we are playing that game. I also want to introduce Robin Bergeon, who is not here with us today, but intellectually always stimulating me, who is a great speaker and a great writer on that issue of digital technology being infrastructure, and infrastructure being a source of power, being what shapes our experiences online, our capabilities, our behavior, what is and what is not possible in the society. So in that sense, we are discussing infrastructure and governance over it. To make that picture more complicated, I have stolen with consent from Robin his way of explaining technological stack. Yes, it's much more than cables, it's much more than AI factories, it is much more than servers. It goes up to various kinds of software, also used for advertising, but also used for content curation, which is what Panopticon has been looking a lot at recently, criticizing how content curation algorithms fail consumers online. So excuse me if I bring that a lot in my questions, but this is my personal interest, although that panel is meant to be a broader overview of digital services, and therefore other panelists will definitely go broader than social media. So at Panopticon, I also have to say it, we still believe that a better internet is possible. that authentically personalized and truly social media are possible, but we are not naive. We've been 17 years in that game, so we know that it probably won't happen, that revolution won't happen without some sort of regulation and without pressure coming from politicians, consumers, and the market itself. So that's why in this panel we will discuss economic incentives, and we have Mastodon with us here to show us the real experience of innovators. And we will discuss upcoming opportunities. I like to see them as opportunities, including the Digital Fairness Act, and that's why we have Isabel with us. But there is also important context that I'm sure Vid will bring up at some point, Digital Markets Act. Those of you who follow that know that it's supposed to be revised, and the Commission has already announced its the premises on which it's going to revise it, and this is much less than we expected, but again, no spoilers. So now we are really starting, and we are starting with the dark picture, with the real picture of what you know today from online experience. And this is why I asked to kick us off Lynn, who is a co-author of an excellent report. If you haven't seen it yet, make sure that just after the panel, you fill that gap. So Lynn, as you put it and Cory Doktorov puts it, what has been driving the end-shitification process in digital services? Please unpack it for us.
Thank you very much. Is the mic
maybe,
working well? Yeah?
Maybe closer.
Okay, good. So we wrote a report. Thank you very much for sharing. It's here, but it's also outside, so please feel free to grab one on the way out after the panel. Shitification is a term that was coined not by us, but by Cory Doktorov, as you mentioned. And it is about the degradation of digital services that we are all using today. So, shitification is what happens when your social media feed is suddenly filled with AI slop and scam ads instead of content that you want to see from people that you want to follow. It is what has happened when your kids are suddenly getting recommended violent and sexualized content on YouTube. It's what has happened when your connected fridge that you bought and that also has a little screen on the door suddenly starts to show ads in the middle of your kitchen in your home. And it's also what happened when you suddenly saw that Google no longer provided useful results when you tried to use it. So, shitification is something that happens in stages. The first stage is that company will start by providing a service that is genuinely useful for consumers at an artificially low price. And that means that the service cannot be sustained over time in the way that it is offered in the first place. So for example, if you look at Facebook, when it was first introduced, it was useful, possible to connect to other friends and family, also maybe across the world. Then, after companies have attracted as many consumers as possible to their service, the second stage starts of shitification, which is that the company will start to degrade the service for the consumers and shift the value proposition from consumers to either themselves, shareholders, or third parties. So, to continue on the example of Facebook, after getting lots of consumers to use the service, started to show personalized ads, meaning that they would exploit consumers' personal data and then use that to create value for business customers. Finally, third stage of shitification, once you have attracted lots of business customers as well by providing value to them, you can start to squeeze both sides of the market. So you continue to degrade the service for consumers, and at the same time, you also start to degrade the service for your business customers. So to wrap up the Facebook example, in the ad tech market, there's a duopoly essentially between Meta, who owns Facebook, and Google, and estimates have shown that between 30 and 50% of the ad spend goes to these intermediaries. So they are really taking all of the value on both sides of the market. So you may ask, why do consumers not just leave when their services that they rely on start being degraded? And there's many reasons for this. I think the first one is that obviously companies will not change their service overnight. So it doesn't go from like the best service ever to the worst service ever, entity-wide service overnight. So it's really something that you get used to over time. And then secondly, there's loads of ways that companies will leverage high switching costs for consumers, which makes it very difficult to leave the service even as it is being degraded. So I will just mention a few because I'm wary of time, but there's several more that I, again, would ask you to look at if you want after the panel in our report. But the first one, which is very obvious, is the use of network effects. So there's a lot of services that are only as useful as the number and the quality of other users who are on the service. So for example, I'm not gonna go onto a messaging services to start text with myself. I really need to have like other friends or colleagues who are on this service for it to be useful. And it's the same for online marketplaces, for example. You're not gonna go to a marketplace without any vendors or without any customers. So this is the first one. The second one is the sunk cost fallacy. So this means essentially that for consumers, if they have spent time, energy, or money on a service, this heightens the cost for them to leave the service afterwards. And this is something that is very prominent in connected products. So we've seen, for example, that for cars, which is typically the second most expensive product that consumers ever buy after their home, the car manufacturers can start to degrade the service afterwards. So for example, we've seen how Nissan they were offering an app that was connected to your car if you bought the car. And then after you have bought the car, they discontinued this service so that you can no longer heat your car from afar, for example. BMW does something similar where they first sell you the car and then afterwards they add subscription fees to continue to, for example, heat your car. Or you heat your seats, sorry. And then just to mention quickly the final issue, which I think is very important, is the technical lock-ins, which will allow companies to also reinforce all of the other effects. And I know that other panelists will also speak to this. But obviously, if you're on Facebook and it was possible to use another service and still access your network on Facebook, you could easily move to a separate service. But Facebook or Meta has made this technically impossible. It's also the same when Apple fingerprints all of the parts on your phone, so that you really need to go to one of Apple's repair shops if you want to repair it afterwards. So these are lots of technical barriers that companies will put in place to make sure that you can only use the service that they provide and not third-party services. And so I'm going to wrap up very soon, just to mention that if you as a consumer manage to get past all of these barriers, so you manage to leave your network behind or you manage to bring your network somewhere else, or have them want to go somewhere else at least, there's one final barrier, and that is that in many cases, there is nowhere else to go. And that is no coincidence. For example, Mark Zuckerberg has said that it's better to buy than to compete. And this is his quote, so it's not something that I'm just making up. And he has also, after seeing that both Instagram and WhatsApp were competitors to the service Facebook, he bought both of them and changed them into something that he preferred. So this is something that big tech does a lot. Out of 300 companies that big tech companies bought since 2015, 64% were discontinued, including very prominent brands such as Skype. And the remaining percentage changed their business models. So they start to extract personal data for consumers in ways that are very much in line with big tech's business model of extraction. So just to wrap up, entitification is unfortunately something that is happening across the board. It's not unique to big tech companies, but big tech companies have a lot to gain and they also kind of play a part in speeding up the entitification process because they can also affect how other companies innovate.
Thank you so much for that overview of the gloomy picture in the area that Panopticon has been looking for specifically in the last years, which is social media. We have seen that great promise of people getting connected, people getting free access to quality media, people getting what Zuckerberg once called personalized newspaper at their doorstep every day, has devolved into a honeypot for advertisers, really, where our attention is trapped, our emotions are manipulated, and we can't possibly control our experience, even if we try. We have done quite a lot of experimentation around that with negative user feedback, with user control settings. I'm still hoping that Digital Services Act will be enforced to the extent that some of that toxicity is removed, and the DFA will be another step into that. But right now, we are actually experiencing quite an shittified version of what was once promised to us as social media. That's why in Polish and in English we call it anti-social, and I encourage everybody to do the same. But it has not been the internet. Now, zooming out to the bigger picture of the internet as such, has not been designed or invented for consumer lock-in and what LCC and Doktorov call shitty experience, has it? So I want to turn to Veit on my right with that question, you being engineer and being person deep in the weeds of what internet has to be, used to be, and could be. Please tell us how it has been designed and what's possible on the design side.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. So I certainly agree with Kasia that identification basically goes against the grain of what the internet, which after all is a decentralized and open network, is, or should I say was, all about. And in the good old days, you could just come and build on top of or alongside a service without the permission of that service operator. And this is because software and protocols can be reverse engineered, which enables what's often called adversarial interoperability. And that was a natural state of the internet for a while. And that enables a whole host of new possibilities. And one of those are third-party clients. So here we have, for instance, a Tweetbot for Twitter. And this allowed you to start reading a timeline on one device and finish it on another, and had a whole host of other useful features. And often, I just want to stress that often interoperability happened in symbiotic win-win relationships with the service. So not many people know this, but retweets actually started as an innovation of third-party clients. And Twitter even acquired a third-party client called, which was then called TweetDeck, but now I think is X-Pro or something. And similarly, Reddit's public API also allowed for the creation of several third-party clients, some of which were, for instance, even more accessibility focused. However, most of these third-party Twitter and Reddit clients had to close down because of their basically pricing changes for API access. Because those service operators wanted to monetize the user-generated content and sell it for AI training. Another interesting example, I think, is FlipChat, which is a third-party WhatsApp client, which allows you to translate conversations. So you can maybe even sort of think of this as bringing different European and other societies closer, or you can just use it as a language learning app. Going even further, some clients even allowed you to combine several services into a single client. And now, for one good example here is Beeper, which allows you to connect to, for instance, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, Signal, and so on. One notable exception being iMessage because of Apple's very hard push against those sort of clients. And this is a concept we're familiar with from email, but we sort of have trouble making that transition to messaging. And personally, I found Beeper very useful because I've deleted Instagram to just stop wasting all the time on Instagram Reels. And this is how I stay in touch with my friends and not miss any notifications. I also want to stress that in the past, what enabled a lot of this interoperability was essentially the web, which is still quite an open platform. And This allows you to, for instance, have browser extensions that allow you to adapt the official web client to suit your own preferences. And these extensions can also be used to improve the health of our ecosystem. So for instance, NewsGuard, you can think of as sort of a media nutrition label. Block Party, for instance, offered a suite of Twitter anti-harassment tools, but after Twitter's API changes, they pivoted towards privacy and enabling users to quickly clean their past posts, and as well as pointing them to various privacy settings that platforms like to keep hidden beneath several menus. The Arrow, I think, is also an interesting example because it crowdsources alternative and clickbait-free YouTube video titles and thumbnails, which is a problem that the heavy hand of regulation can hardly solve. It's also very beneficial beneficial to protect consumers and help them make more informed decisions. So for instance, the Consumer Rights Wiki has an extension that surfaces various factoids about basically bad practices of certain companies when you visit that company's website. Keepa also allows you to track the price history on Amazon and see what is actually a sale and what is not. Sponsor Block, which I think is also relevant in the context of the DFA, also highlights sponsored videos or sponsored segments of a video, which is especially useful when influencers, for instance, don't make those declarations or hide them somewhere deep in the description where no one looks for them. However, we've shifted from the web towards more native apps, and such solutions there are basically impossible. I also want to impress on everyone that let's not forget, this is how, for instance, Facebook, interoperability was how Facebook was able to make it easy for MySpace users to switch over while staying in touch with their network back on MySpace. But then that same Facebook turned around and sued a company called Power Ventures for creating a client that combined the social media feeds of several social media sites. And they won that lawsuit. And those sorts of lawsuits are one of the reasons why such interoperability is much rarer these days. I do think there is hope on the horizon, especially in the form of the open social web, which is commonly refers to the Fediverse and Mastodon especially, but also the atmosphere, where Blue Sky is perhaps the most prominent service within it, and that really shows what sort of future third-party moderation and content curation that, for instance, Blue Sky enables can look like. I also want to perhaps note that this, if we want sovereign solutions, this is a quick shortcut to get there. So for instance, we have Eurosky, which is a sort of a European Blue Sky, but also it enables just general openness. So OpenVibe is such a client that connects to these open social web services, and it also RSS and allows you to cross-post to all of them at the same time. So yeah, I think sometimes just a whiff of a credible threat of competition is enough to get the tech giants to start moving and maybe reconsider doing that shitty thing they were about to do. But we are losing that, which is why we need regulation.
Thank you so much for making it tangible and explain how interoperability has worked, could work on the internet. It's not the end of that. We will go deeper. I just want to reinforce one message which Vit mentioned, but for me as a lawyer, it was an eye-opener when I really heard it, that the move from open web to applications has been, this is when the closing really happened. So until today, we meet, it sounds very serious until today, but we still meet innovators, researchers who play with platforms like YouTube, Twitter, using their the browser version of them, because to some extent, that old form of interoperability with APIs is still possible if you open those services through a browser. But of course, that's not how they are designed. That's not how we are taught and trained to use them. And what might seem at the beginning, now back to Lynn's point, as natural improvement, that on my small device, my smartphone, I don't have to open the browser, but I open an application which is designed to trick me in and make me feel like, you know, it's just intuitive and clicks before, opens before I think. That has been a very thoughtful move from the companies that knew that only by moving us to their own territory, which is application, they can entitify that experience later on with us being trapped. So that distinction between how people design applications and how people can still design interesting things through browsers was something very interesting for me. But yeah, the hope would be, can we do the same experimentation or even more with application ecosystem that still courageous researchers try with browsers? And we have with us one innovator who tries that with the application ecosystem, Felix, Mastodon. I believe you can use it through a browser, but you can you certainly develop app, and it's interoperable, isn't it? Tell us, please, what's your vision? What's your practical vision of what we call here fair, sovereign, and authentically personalized service? Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation and for the great points that have been raised already. So generally speaking, when we talk about fair, sovereign, and authentically personalized, this is how you say. This is of course very, very close to what Mastodon does and to our vision. Let's try to break it down, what these things actually mean. So if we talk about the term fair or fairness in general, it's very commonly used to describe an exchange that is supposed to be fair. You know, you think of concept, is a game fair, basically, is a bet fair, but also is the exchange that I have with my landlord or my landlady, is it fair? Do I get a fair price? What about my employer? And if you apply this to the digital world and also to social media specifically, fairness is really the exchange that you have as a user with the platform that you're using and with the people, but potentially also with the companies on this platform. And the way that Mastodon has approached this and the broader Fediverse as well, which is the network around us and also other players in this part of the internet, is that at Mastodon we have built a system, a platform, a social network where user choice is truly respective, and this is not it's not a marketing phrase. This is like a technical reality that everything that you post on Mastodon, it's shown to the people that you follow. There's no algorithm that you have to game, and very importantly, there's no advertisement business model. So this was like it was a product choice, a product basically business model design choice. It has been mentioned at the very beginning of this panel that obviously the choices that you make in terms of the business models that you pick, they will hugely determine not only how much money shareholders or other stakeholders can extract, but obviously it influences the whole dynamics regarding fairness, because suddenly it's not only anymore who creates the best content, but it's suddenly questions come up, who creates the most monetizable content. This is something that famously you see very well in how Instagram has developed and how TikTok has developed. YouTube, of course, you know, there seems to be no non-sponsored videos anymore. And this is something that on Mastodon, simply because we took this part out of the equation, it just doesn't exist. You know, basically almost only humans there that talk naturally. Another social network that is it went a bit sideways in terms of how people communicate there. I'm sure many of you have noticed is LinkedIn. You know, the way that people communicate on LinkedIn, and that people say, you have to go in the comment section to see the link. You know, this is not natural. It's gaming the algorithm, and it's trying to get beyond that. And this is just, these are choices. These are tough choices that we took. It's a tough path that we took, because we decided to do it a non-profit way. The non-profit way means that there is no shareholders to please, but this is really owned by the public. We are reliant on the support by the public, both from the user base. Community owned is great, but only as long as it's also community financed, of course. There's also, of course, help needed from the public side. This is both from how it is developed. So these are like R&D grants, research and development grants, where we got some very generous support from the European Union, but also from Germany. And all of these things, they obviously influence then in how such an alternative, because Mastodon is like a true alternative if you look at the landscape, can actually be built, but also can be built up in a way that is sustainable in the long run. And one thing maybe also about motivation is that Mastodon and I would say most of the players in our space, they are less incentivized or motivated to build like a new Facebook or a new Twitter or something like this, but they are much more fascinated by the idea to someone become something like what Wikipedia achieved or what Signal achieved. And I think if you think of these examples and this landscape, also Signal and also Wikipedia, these are not the only players in their respective spaces, but the fact that a non-profit player exists in these spaces, it completely changes the dynamics in these markets. Because it's an alternative that will always be there, hopefully, compared to the commercial solutions, which will also, we are not dogmatic about these things. A lot of people, they also live a bit detached from reality, and they just hope that the way that they take their decisions, that these should be applied to all the other players in this field. And this is not how markets work, at least free markets. But it's very important to have this diversity and to not only have commercial players, but to also have more like public benefit oriented players. And briefly regarding the point of sovereignty, yes, sovereignty it's a heavy and it's a loaded term nowadays, and it's something that can be interpreted in many different ways. I mean, both philosophically and more like from a legal point of view. But sovereignty also from a technical point of view, it has a very special meaning in a decentralized social network like Mastodon. So decentralized social, it means that Mastodon is not one social network, but it's a federation out of currently 8,000 active social networks. You could see them like mini social networks. They can all talk to each other thanks to open protocols, and this is basically applied interoperability and portability. And sovereignty in this context means that you can own your own social network. You can own your own small part of the internet, same as you could own your own email server. And this is something, if you think of the incumbent players, this is something that none of the incumbent players offers you such a sovereign solution. And sovereignty in this sense, it goes on individual personal level. You could run it for yourself and your family and friends. You could run it for a larger group like your community, but you could also run it for organization or even like a supranational organization. So the European Commission, for example, runs their own Mastodon social network, hosted on European infrastructure, of course. And this is something that it does have power from a technical point of view.
Thank you for giving your perspective. I will be curious to understand better how EU regulation can help you with your mission. But before that, I really want to hear the perspective of the European Commission, because we have Isabelle Prignon with us today. Isabelle, you have heard a lot of criticism about the market state of play, and at the Commission you have spent years doing the digital fitness check and trying to understand what needs to be improved in the consumer protection. As a result of this, you are now working on a proposal for the Digital Fairness Act. Can you tell us what you have found out and to what extent that experience that others brought to the panel compares with your understanding of what's wrong and what needs to be fixed?
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Katarzyna, for your invitation. Very happy to be with you this afternoon, because I think it's really this discussion that we're going to have comes really at the right moment. Because indeed, I mean, we've been working now with my team on the preparation of the Digital Fairness Act. So where are we today? I mean, we are about to present the impact assessment that is, you know, the necessary step when you want to regulate at EU level. We are analyzing different options. I will explain to you what exactly. And we assessing in terms of, I mean, economic costs and benefits, what will be the different options that we imagine to fix a number of issues. So what are the issues that we identified? I mean, first, doesn't come as a surprise. We published, it was in October 2024, the Digital Fairness Fitness Check report, and we identified already several problems, some of them being mentioned just now by my colleagues. And we want, with this basis then, to see what we can address and concretely, in a very pragmatic manner, with the existing legislation that we have already. So it's not, again, and I'm insisting a lot about the fact that we absolutely want to come with a new legislation, etc. No, we want to identify concretely what are still the problems that we face with all the legislation that exists, and then from there, what are the different options, what are still indeed the gaps, and how we can address them. So what we have seen, for example, and you are, I guess, all aware of what is the mission and the context of the Digital Fairness Act. It's written in the mission letter that Commissioner McGrath received. As you know, as the commissioners come and start their mandate on the 1st of December 2024, they all received mission letters quite detailed on what they need to do. So for the Digital Fairness Act, we were tasked with my team to address the problematic practices such as the dark patterns, addictive design, unfair personalization, influencer marketing, but we also dealing into the issues of dynamic pricing, difficulties with the cancellation of contracts concluded online, automatic renewals of subscriptions, unexpected price hikes following free trials, or the inability to reach a human interlocutor for customer services. So that's everything that we have been studying and impact assessing now with the team. And what is our starting and our baseline? I mean, the baseline is the legislation that we have today already at European level. I mean, we have a strong consumer protection basis. We have directives like the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive, the Unfair Contract Terms Directive, Consumer Rights Directive that have been existing for many years. There are principle-based directives, which means that irrespective of the technology or the business model used, we can apply them. And we see that the national enforcement authorities have been applying them. But we also see that despite this legislation existing at EU level, we still have many gaps and many new phenomena appearing and that we cannot cover legally. So that's why we decided to have an ambitious Digital Fairness Act that we want to present by the end of this year. So for example, and that's also something that we just mentioned now in the panel, I agree with you that there's some digital asymmetry and that it really impacts the consumer's capacity to act autonomously. For instance, we have all experienced dark patterns that may withhold relevant information or disclose untruthful information and capitalize on a wide range of behavioral bases. You have also spending and attention maximizing features of digital services that trigger compulsive behavioral tendencies. That's what we call the addictive designs, whereby, for example, it's very difficult to, and we need to leverage the lack of transparency regarding uncertainty-based rewards or obscure, the real value of digital transactions. And we see that there's phenomenon like how consumers' attention is, prolonged, and also how consumers are pushed to pay or even more than that what they originally wanted. We're also looking at the issue of personalized advertisements and prices that can be very different from one person to another. I mean, I guess you all experience that you connect yourself on a website, you try to order a product, and even if your friend sitting nearby you on a different computer is accessing the same product exactly at the same time, they have a different price. And so the lack of transparency regarding these practices is for us something that we tackle and that we want to tackle under the Digital Fairness Act. We want especially to protect the more vulnerable consumers. I mean, the persons who, are like my parents, very have difficulties to have access to digital services, like persons with disabilities and the minors, how we can protect them in this challenging digital environment. And what I want really to make sure and to reassure is that we are very aware of this imbalance between what we see, the traders developing and the consumers. And what we want really to do is with the existing tools, again, because we know that we have, for example, the famous DSA being able to enforce certain provisions. We saw, for example, the case that was opened in February on TikTok, on the TikTok case, whereby we, for the first time, managed to identify and develop what is really a phenomenon of addiction and translate this into legal terms. So we have some instruments, but we see that we need to have a stronger enforcement of all the measures that we are identifying as being problematic. On unfair personalization, so I was mentioning for example, now the case of discrimination into the prices, but we see also unfair personalization in terms of personalized advertising that sometimes use your personal data. And of course, this can be to some extent covered by the GDPR, but not always. And we are in this Digital Fairness Act really trying to find what will come out specifically from the public surveys that we launched. So we got more than 7,000 contributions. I must say that the team is very busy, analyzing everything. And we want really to make sure that what we are going to propose as the different options really will make a difference. And we follow, of course, closely the special panel that was launched and called by our president, so Ursula von der Leyen. We had 3 meetings so far. The last one was yesterday. And this special panel of experts with psychologists bring really a lot of information onto how and what is really the impact on the health and the impact on the behaviors of the minors when they are online. And this comes in the context, and you have heard the president last week when she was speaking at the AI Summit in Copenhagen, where the president announced that the Commission will come with a proposal by the summer to see how we can address this system of age and define a system of age gating, how we can use now this age verification app that was being designed and being promoted a few weeks ago, and how the Digital Fairness Act will be able to then draw and put, input this work. So this is the context in which we are operating, and that's why the team is extremely busy preparing now this very ambitious Digital Fairness Act, which comes, of course, in a context which is not easy, as you know, because we need now to also make sure that we bring simplification, that we don't overlap with existing rules. And so my challenge is really to find the correct balance between what we can do in terms of adding new legislation, but also how we can clarify and simplify other parts of the legislation.
Yeah, I have to stop you, Isabel, because if you want input from that room, which is a unique mix of people, we need to, yes.
So just a final word, just ambitious DFA that will come together with ambitious system of enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
Happy to take your
we do cheer for that. That's exactly the direction that many of us would hope to get. There was even an open letter signed by BEUC, Panopticon, and many others asking exactly for that when the deregulation agenda has been all around the media, and we got scared that the DFA will become much less ambitious. Listening to your overview of what's on the table and also being aware of the proposal, how this is shaped, I'm quite confident that we get a lot of fairness and a lot of what we call in our bubble safe by default or safe by design. So many ways of protecting not only minors, but also adults, because vulnerability does not depend on age. I feel fully vulnerable to manipulative design, regardless of how old I'm getting. And yes, minors are particularly vulnerable in some aspects, but so are adults in others. I'm more concerned about the personalization aspect of it, which was important in our discussion. Just before coming here, I attended briefly a workshop organized by EDRI about the DFA and the consumer regulation. We discussed in groups solutions to problems that consumers encounter online every day, like autoplay, recommendations in content feed that surprise you, trigger you, are not what you expect. And the first remedy that one of the group proposed was, let's open it. Let's open those gated gardens, those applications that became traps, for alternative design that is not controlled by the main players, by the gatekeepers. In other words, let's not spend another decade talking to the gatekeepers about them kindly fixing some of the unsafe design, because in my humble opinion, GDPR should have been sufficient, honestly. I mean, I can't really get my head around the fact that there's so much addictive design and dark patterns online, regardless of the legislation we have. So, as I said, cheering for the DFA, I'm concerned, many people here at that conference are concerned that the law itself, the prohibitions in the law or the new rules in the law won't be sufficient to push the market to a better place. And we have to think technology. We have to think about solutions that will be better by design. And one of them has been mentioned by Lynn and by Vid already, but I want to bring, before we open the discussion, which I promise to do very soon because I'm aware of the time, I really want Vid to help us again reflect on what do we already have in Europe in terms of interoperability, what's already possible and what is missing from the picture as an input for the DFA discussion, because we have this unique opportunity of of Isabel listening to us. So if you can take us again to that one remedy that, in my opinion, would be very interesting and is not yet on the table in the Commission overview.
Yeah, so it's true we already have certain interoperability obligations. We have OS and virtual assistant interop in the DMA, which right now is failing because of the lack of enforcement and because no virtual assistants have been designated. And this falls into the bucket of so-called vertical interop, which essentially means that you have there's data exchange between different levels of the tech stack. So, for instance, between an app and the operating system. However, in contrast to that, we also have horizontal interop, which is communication between the same level of the tech stack. And this type of interop is used to solve so-called network effect issues that Lynn mentioned previously. And we have one type of, we have this interop, but only for messaging services. In the European Electronic Communications Code and in the DMA. And in the DMA, it's failing or it hasn't really seen much uptake because, well, first, there's not really much interest and support from the Commission. There's also challenges with reaching users outside the EU. And yeah, it's not working right now. And in terms of what's really missing is to fill this gap for horizontal interop for social media services as well. Now, as previously mentioned, the Commission sort of decided going for this in the revision of the DMA, concluding that it's still too early. Now, personally, with Musk calling for the EU to be abolished and him and the US administration essentially declaring war on our information space and supporting the European far right, you'd think this would cause a change within the Commission, but apparently not. I think it's fighting a losing battle. And personally, I think the DSA might be a better fit, but we don't have time to get into that right now. So having such a mandate would be crucial, but okay. Said it's still too early for interop. What can we do? What other things can we do? There's still more immediate and proven solutions that, while maybe not allowing users to leave the old services behind, make the user experience a whole lot better. And what I propose are two categories of vertical interop obligations, which are much easier to implement. So first, we would have vertical interop obligations to enable so-called middleware, by which I mean third-party moderation services and content curation. So for instance, we could have alternative spam filters and prevent what is now intentional downranking of external links and news content. And this approach has also been endorsed by the Council of Europe in its recommendations on the safety and empowerment of online users and content creators. Second, and perhaps more importantly, we need third-party client interoperability. Now, this mandate would essentially merely require third-party access to interfaces that already exist but are not publicly documented because service providers choose to restrict access to themselves. And this would enable so-called loyal clients and other solutions that I presented in the opening round. It would, to a certain extent, just regularize some existing practices and create a predictable business environment without the fear that a capricious platform change could suddenly end an entire developer's business. And for example, this sort of obligation could require notice before changes to prevent breakage, support from the platform documentation, that sort of thing. And you could have tiered obligations. For instance, on the company size, and for smaller companies, maybe all you need are negative obligations and a safe harbor from lawsuits. One such example, for instance, Google Photos has an API, but its developer policies prohibit you from using it to essentially build competing services. So this is a legal and organizational barrier, not a technical one.
Okay, I see that Lynn wants to use that bridge to comment, but this is also the time where I want all of you to tell us what you think. We only have 20 minutes left, which is, I don't know how it happened, but the first round was much more rich and I didn't stop it. So apologies for that. We can stay longer maybe, looking at the boss. So yes, Lynn, over to you and please prepare your comments and questions.
Maybe if I can just quickly also comment on the DFA. So obviously we're super happy to hear that you want to have an ambitious DFA. This is something that the Norwegian Consumer Council has also been working on for many, many years. Topics such as addictive design, deceptive design, unfair personalization. But going back to the issue of enshittification, I think all of these things are features of enshittifications. They're features of the fact that companies can essentially do whatever they want today because they can unilaterally change the terms of a deal after you've made the deal with them. So it's like you're buying a table and then you bring this table home and then the company comes back into your home afterwards to paint it another color or like remove one of the parts of the table, so it doesn't really work anymore in the way that you envisioned it. So what we're really also hoping to see on top of the ambitious DFA that would tackle all of these kind of features, which we need to do as well, is to have the interoperability possibilities for social media, but also I think beyond social media, because it's really something that is ingrained in a lot of the digital services that we have today. So I just wanted to mention this quickly.
Important. I see the first comment or question, but Felix, please let us, would that mandate, would forcing other players to do a lot of what you are already doing in your part, in your better corner of the internet, would that be meaningful in any way for Mastodon and other innovators, or that's irrelevant to your business model?
So it would certainly level the playing field because doing it in such an honest and ethical way at Mastodon, it's kind of meaningless if all the others basically play in an unfair manner. But it would certainly help from that point of view. However, the way that this would really help, the way we are building it, would be if there's obviously benefits by doing it the right way beyond of just not being fined, basically.
Not being fined. So more structural measures imposed by...
Yes, and it's also related to funding, of course, but this is like a separate discussion.
Turning to the audience, participation.
Hello, I'm Christina Irion, University of Amsterdam. I'm very grateful for this extremely well organized and informative panel. Thank you. I wanted to also thank the Norwegian Consumer Council for this terrific video on how to make things shitty. I think I have had such a good laugh how you managed to bring that across. Really well done. This topic, I talk now as a consumer, not as an academic. Yeah, I see how LinkedIn now goes down the drain. Yeah, how it becomes more and more. I cannot believe that I'm saying it.
Like we can always almost say what's next, right?
Yeah.
We know that story.
How it's really degrading. How it starts to make this service getting worse and worse. It used to be kind of a professional network, right? And now we are seeing all these tricks that we know from other social media also playing out there. And I'm so angry about my investments because these are my investments in this platform because I'm sharing content, I'm giving them also something. It is a form of labor. And I feel actually that this is now, you don't get anything back. And they are pulling all the tricks. And so I'm wondering if, and other platforms are similar. Yeah, you on Amazon or on booking.com, you can't find anything anymore. It's like a total stress to be there. And why don't we go away? Yes, because there's this convenience factor. You get something sorted and so on. But I believe that as a consumer, we have no voice. And I wanted to ask now a question to you. Apart from legislation, like the Digital Fairness Act and the GDPR, why is there not more like consumer councils, like a sort of a trade union of consumers who are representing themselves on a platform and can maybe not have a formal voice like a trade union has, but has to, at least a more collective power moment here. I think we would be quite noisy then.
Thank you, Christina. Maybe let's take 2 other comments or questions if there are. Matteo, Okay. Now it's more okay. Okay, Matthias, you get the last one in this round, but we'll try to.
Matteo Fabri from the University of Amsterdam. So I have a question regarding DMA implementation for what concerns interoperability. So as you know, gatekeepers such as WhatsApp need to interoperate, so to send reference offers to which other providers may respond. However, so the first question I have is WhatsApp for the interoperability claims to use the Signal protocol. We don't know how much of it, I mean, to which extent it uses it, if they use the latest security guarantees or not, but in the latest compliance report of March 2026, they explicitly state that the interoperable version, I mean, if the user chooses to interoperate, the system itself, so the dialogue between the client and server, might become less secure if unless the other provider chooses to interoperate directly with Meta itself. So instead of choosing to interoperate with a server in between. They state this in the compliance report, and I am wondering from a technical perspective, how true is this? Secondly, another question that I have is if you have any idea of why Signal decided not to interoperate with Meta despite it uses the Signal protocol.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Last question for now. Matthias in the wall.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for a very interesting panel. This is Matthias Vermeulen from Director at the AWO. I have a question for Ms. Perignon and the Commission. You mentioned in your presentation that, of course, there's a lot of movement about age gating proposals, some of the things that President von der Leyen has actually said as well last week in Copenhagen, calling for a pause. And I think there has been a lot of discussion already today and probably next couple of days about sort of a ban for social media for kids as well. And I think a lot can be said about this, but it can never be sort of the only example here and the only solution here. It could work as a pause, as President von der Leyen has said, because the markets for social media for kids is so bad that we need this type of emergency measure. But I'm also wondering then also building a little bit further on your comments, whether you see potentially the Digital Fairness Act as a market opportunity as well, in the sense that you can say like, okay, there's a ban now for certain services, but could you in the DFA also think about sort of a whitelist approach for certain certified services who meet age-appropriate design criteria, for instance, and that would actually allow the creation of like a safe social market for kids. And then crucially, to add some of the comments that were said here on the panel, you can add like a real interoperability mandate as well for those whitelisted services so that you prevent some of sort of the difficulties and flaws of the current social media markets as well. Thank you.
Thank you for great questions. We go like this. Lynn, Isabel, Vit, and you prepare for the final round of questions.
Sure, thank you. So I will try to maybe touch upon the first question about kind of consumer empowerment maybe a bit and how we can try to have more kind of collective efforts against some of the big tech services. I think big tech has proven over many years now that they disregard what consumers want, and maybe potentially we could try to create like a movement. I think maybe you could envision this kind of movement that is really like calling for changes. But what we would be hopeful for is to kind of skip this step by calling instead for vertical interoperability, which was mentioned now. So instead of asking big tech to change their services in ways that would be preferable for us and that would create a useful service for us, just saying that if you're not going to provide it, then we will go to a third-party provider who will provide it for us instead. So the idea is really to shift this power imbalance a little bit again, instead of kind of continue to try to call for them to make the changes that we have been asking them to do, and that they are ignoring even when authorities are telling them to do it, even when
they get fined.
Exactly, even when they are getting fined, even when there are numerous court decisions saying that they keep trying to just circumvent it a little bit. And I'm not so sure that we would see something different if we had these bigger communities, maybe. But if we could technically make it possible to just change the services in a different way directly, I think this could, or that is our hope at least, that we could then start to see more innovation that will be for our good instead of for the good of big tech companies and their shareholders. Yeah, and maybe if I can mention briefly as well, that another way to try to change the trajectory a bit, which is not directly coming from like the consumer way of making choices, like consumer choice, is actually public procurement, which I think is a very interesting way also to try to force big tech to change their practices a bit, because right now public procurement is a massive procurer of big tech services, which allows them to also continue to cement their power. So if we could get every public sector in Europe to start to shift their spending from big tech over to interoperable services, open source services, this would again create a new market, like a separate market that would be more, hopefully, protective of consumers' rights at the end of the day as well. So there's some different options as well, I think.
Or at least prevent our taxpayers' money flowing to companies that harm us.
Or maybe both, yeah.
Isabel, there was an important question for you, so...
Yeah, maybe you reply to the two questions, because there was also the one on the voice of consumers. So as a director for consumer policy, I receive a lot of consumers' voice. And what I see is that you have many who come and address national consumer organizations, and then they come to see us and they voice this. You have also the European consumer centers that exist in all the member states and that the European Commission finance to some extent, to some part of it, that also have a strong lobbying and they have strong voices. And you have also the possibility to have, for example, the collective actions now that we open legally for consumers, to launch these actions. On the second issue that you were raising, I was mentioning indeed the speech from the president last week in Copenhagen, and now the whole discussion that we have in first, we need to wait for the the outcome and the concrete results that will be brought by the special panel that will come in the summer, so most probably July. And then we need to see on that basis, but that will be a political decision, what we are going to address. But I think the speech already last week gave some good indications. But the first step is to see and to wait for the recommendations of the special panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Fit.
Yeah, so to address the second question, which was about WhatsApp and Signal and just the Article 7 DMA solution. So I'm going to give, maybe controversially here, Meta credit here. I think out of all the DMA compliance solutions we've seen, they've been very ready and they've really stepped up to make this more workable, except to make non-EU users accessible by EU users, and that's the real barrier. Meta has actually even extended or at least promised to add features beyond what is required by the DMA. In terms of the Signal protocol, yes, it's true, WhatsApp does use Signal protocol. They have a special license with the Signal Foundation for this. However, they don't use it in the same way. So they don't exchange the same sort of messages. They don't protect profile info in the same way. Is that a true barrier? I don't think so. Signal has been a bit dogmatic, I think, in even refusing to consider this option, regrettably. But yeah, they would be compatible, and even if they weren't, Meta has also signaled that they're willing to support other encryption solutions such as messaging layer security and such. In terms of the server in between, which I think you were asking about, they've also been open to this. However, in the current reference offer, they indeed there are provisions that you have to forward the IP address of the user to Meta, but this is for spam purposes. I think there are technical solutions to spam. We don't have time to get into that right now, that can sort of bridge that gap and maybe lead to even less data sharing. But yeah, that's not currently being discussed because we only have two potential competitors using WhatsApp's interoperability solution. So yeah, and it's definitely not less secure because just if you have more nodes in the network, that essentially means that not every node sees all the metadata. If it's implemented right, of course. There is a paper that actually specifically looks at this.
We'll make sure that all the links are available to you. And with 5 minutes left only, I can only invite like 3 short comments or questions. Lady here was very patient. Yes, no, here. Yeah. No, sorry. Yes,
I wasn't Emmy.
No.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. So I have a question for Madame Perrion, for Isabel. So thank you for your elaboration on the Digital Fairness Act. Maybe it has been a bit overshadowed by all the news on the digital omnibuses. And I was wondering, is there maybe a tension between the two? Because the omnibuses represent an agenda of simplification, maybe even deregulation if you ask some persons. And the DFA seems to be going the opposite way. So I was wondering how you see this.
Lady in black, yes? Were you waiting as well? No? Yes, you? No? Yes. So we take yours. And maybe one more quick, if you give me a hand. Yes, here. Okay. Last one in the first round.
I also have a question for Madame Perrignon related to the question that was previously posed. You mentioned that you were looking forward to have an ambitious vision for enforcement, and this has been one challenge that has been really plaguing the entirety of the European Digital Rulebook. So I wonder if there's already some features about enforcement that you'd be able to share that can maybe overcome some of the challenges that we've been seeing in other laws. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks to the panel. I'll try to be brief. Is our job here as the CPDP community to try and convince people who say, I don't mind surveillance, I don't mind personalization, as long as my life is more convenient? Are we trying to convince them not to think that? Or are we saying, okay, you can all think that, that's fine, but we want alternatives like Mastodon for those of us who don't want that? Do we want to try and change people's minds or say, okay, you can have your opinion, but we've got alternatives for people who want to opt out of the big tech and all the problems that come with it?
Thank you. So now I let everybody to comment briefly on what you have heard in questions, combined with your final remarks. It's really 1 minute per each. And now we start with Felix.
To the last question, I think we want a bit of both. I think the alternatives, they need to be strengthened, but also the incumbents, they need to be broken up. This is something that can already, in first instances, it can already be seen. Meta's threads implemented parts of the protocol that Mastodon uses, but ultimately, the DMA and also the forcing mechanisms to this proved as not strong enough to make them comply all the way that I interpret it.
Mm-hmm. Isabel?
Yes, so on the two questions shortly. So first, indeed, there are many, in a political context, there are many omnibuses on the table. And one of them, which is very relevant for us, is indeed the one on the digital omnibus. So what we do is that we're going to take the outcome of the digital omnibus, and on that basis, we are analyzing what are still the gaps. And Still, we want to be ambitious because we want to fill these gaps, and that will be, of course, a matter of political discussions that will come, in the autumn. But at my level, what I want to be is ambitious, being aware of what is the outcome of the digital omnibus and the other legislation, but then still fill the gaps with legislation. And on the second point, on enforcement, it's very important to know that we are doing this reform of the CPC. So the CPC is the national consumer enforcement bodies that exist in all the 27 member states. And for now, what happens is that it's a national competence, and we, Commission, are coordinating the national actions. But what we see in practice is two things. First, that on average, it takes 18 months to reach, for between the trader and the authorities, an agreement. It's a voluntary commitment. And then there's no fines being imposed so far through the CPC action. So this is really something that we absolutely want to change. Take an example. For example, we opened an investigation against Temu in November 2024. We are in May 2026. I'm sitting with our lawyers every week. Where are we? That's really why we think it's really the moment to enforce our consumer legislations, to be very strong. And that's why, it's also a flagship initiative by the Commission to come with a revision of the CPC together with the Digital Finance Act. And that will come as a package by the end of this year.
Thank you. Lynn, your last words for today.
Thank you. I will also respond to the last question primarily. I think we shouldn't have to pick necessarily. Of course, when it comes to the fundamental right of data protection, for example, this is something that we should all have by default, so you shouldn't have to pick one or the other. So we really do need to enforce the laws that we already have, whether it's consumer law or data protection law. So that has to be kind of the given premise, I think. And then on top of that, we should also have innovation, like reduce the power that big tech currently holds over the market and over all of us as individuals, and at the same time create the potential to have new innovations. And I think this is especially important because right now we're talking about this a lot with many different people. And what we often get as a response when we're talking about social media interoperability, for example, is that it's very difficult to envision because we're also used to being trapped in the services that we have. So we need to start to also see some of these innovations and these alternative third-party services that we could have had so that people can start seeing what we're all missing out on, right? There's so much potential online and we're missing out of all of it because we're all trapped in these big tech services. So
but
everything.
There is so potential in this panel, but we have to
just briefly, arguably, you can see that already with the Fediverse and the atmosphere.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Vid.
Yeah, so I think the examples I gave in the opening round and what I talked about in the second round also showed that these types of interop obligations are not just about economic competition, which I think, in fact, might be a secondary objective. And there are also other more important policy goals and objectives, chiefly consumer protection. So if we want to prevent dark patterns and pointless time spent on these services, addiction, removing autoplay, removing distracting elements, we could have actually some useful screen time controls. And this is also what the European Parliament called for in its report on addictive design. Third-party client interop can also improve content moderation. It can do the sort of middleware in a more limited fashions, of course, but the sort of middleware which I talked about earlier. And it allows escaping ecosystem locking. It allows for better data portability. So despite not being about just one of these things, it's about all of these things. And it can achieve many policy objectives really for the price of just one obligation. And what all this has in common is fairness towards the consumer, respect for their autonomy, which I think makes it a very good fit for consumer protection legislation, especially the DFA. So while software and protocols can be reverse engineered, they can also be changed at every whim of a platform. So if the platform can say, I altered the deal, pray I don't alter it further, I say, give us interop, we can alter that deal even further. So what's good for consumers can also turn out to be very good for businesses as well, which can then expand into other markets. And what enshritificators really fear is not regulation they can run circles around, which I've done every single time before, but real competition that keeps them on their toes.
See many solutions at the price of one intervention. I hope we can use that line in many policy conversations. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for staying with us a bit longer. You have some links here if you want more. Also today in 10 minutes at the radio, Avatar FM, there will be discussion about Mastodon, practical overview of practical possibilities for civil societies. Stay with us online. And keep coming back at CPDP. Thank you so much.